following presentation is a recorded training for Ascentis Payroll. This training takes place in a demo environment. No live client data is being shown. Thank you for attending the Ascentis Payroll Product Overview Training. The purpose of this training is to acquaint new users with the Ascentis Payroll product, allowing you to see a layout of the product so as to feel more comfortable when logging in for the first time and navigating around. During this training, we'll briefly highlight some of the primary features and tools found within Ascentis Payroll. The first process that will be demonstrated during this training is the process of logging in. The preferred method is to install Ascentis Payroll as a shortcut on your desktop. To launch Ascentis Payroll, you simply double-click on the shortcut to bring up the login screen. Each time you start the login process, Ascentis checks that you're running the most current version available. If there's an update available, the system will automatically launch a download of that update and complete the update prior to allowing you to log in. The whole process is automated, so there's virtually nothing for you to do when there's a new product version available. It's useful to note that because Ascentis Payroll is a web-enabled product, you can access it from any computer with Internet access. This allows you to install it on your home PC or a laptop, and thus access Ascentis Payroll even when you're not at your business office. To complete your login, simply enter your username and password that you were assigned and click Login. Once you have successfully logged into Ascentis Payroll, you'll initially land on the Welcome page, where you'll see the current messages posted by Ascentis. It's a good idea to read the messages posted here from time to time, as this is one of the main ways Ascentis communicates important information, such as details on upcoming version releases, changes in payroll-related laws, or notices of deadlines to complete quarter-end and year-end sign-off. If you're a single directory client, you can simply click Close on this message to enter into the main payroll system. If you're a multiple directory client, you'll first need to select the directory you want to access. Once you've selected the directory and closed the welcome message, you'll now enter into the main payroll product. We'll now take a few moments to review the various features that might be available to you. The first feature we'll review together is the Employee feature. Now, there are many tools located on the main Employee screen, but the primary purpose of this screen is to access employee information, either by selecting an employee and then opening their payroll master file, or by selecting an employee and accessing one of the history screens. There are other tools located on this feature as well, including an option to mass import master file data, either by using a special Ascentis macro-enabled Excel workbook or with a custom import program. Also located on this screen is a paycheck simulator. Below the primary employee tools, you may see an event list. The event list displays all of the coming events of the next 30 days. Examples of events would be upcoming payrolls to be processed, scheduled company events or holidays, or bank and Ascentis holidays. The event list is controlled by the Calendar feature, which is located on the Utilities screen. Please note that the event list will only be displayed in your payroll directory if you are set up to use Calendar integration. Please be sure to view the Ascentis Payroll Employee Training module for a full training. We're now going to move on to the Payroll Processing feature. As the label implies, the primary purpose of this feature is to process your payroll. Notice at the top of the screen, it lists the payroll processing steps. There are 5 main steps that each client goes through to process a payroll. Let's review each of these briefly. Step 1 is journalizing. This is the step where you create your payroll journal. Now, depending on the payroll systems you've used in the past, you may be more familiar with the terms such as batches, grids, or folders. In Ascentis, we call these journals. There are many ways to create a journal, and there are several different journal types. A common example of creating a journal is importing a time clock file. When you import the time clock file, it will result in a new journal being created. That journal will now hold a check with the entries for each employee that had hours or earnings in the file you imported. Another common step that takes place from this screen is the pulling of salary payments into a journal. Other common steps include voiding a check or posting manual adjustments. Step 2 is journal selection. This is the step where you select which of the journals that you've created should now be merged together into one combined file to be calculated and processed. Most of the time you would select all of the journals. However, there may be instances where you have an adjustment file or some other journal in progress that you do not want to merge into the payroll you're getting ready to calculate. Step 3 is payroll calculation. This is the step where you calculate the payroll, which results in several audit reports for your review. When reviewing the audit reports, you may find errors with the payroll or things you'd like to change. You can still make changes and corrections to the payroll at this point by simply returning to step 1, opening the merged journal, making your corrections, closing the journal, returning to the payroll calculation screen, and clicking the Recalculate button. This will result in a new set of audit reports for your review. You can keep repeating this process of correcting the journal entries, recalculating the payroll, and reviewing the new audit reports until you're satisfied that the payroll is correct. At that point, you can move on to step 4. Step 4 is check processing. This is the step where you create the check file for printing. If Ascentis prints your checks, then completing this step will result in Ascentis instantly receiving your check file. If you print your own checks and vouchers, there will be several reports and files for you to print once you complete this step. Step 5 is finishing the payroll. This is the final step in payroll processing. When you complete this step, you'll receive several standard system reports, such as a variety of check registers, labor reports, cash activity reports, and possibly tax liability reports. You may also receive certain custom reports that have been designed specifically for your company and that have been attached to run at this step of payroll processing. This is also the step that triggers the creation of the tax file, if you have tax service, and a direct deposit file, if you have direct deposit service. If Ascentis transmits your tax and direct deposit files, these files are instantly received by us when you complete the payroll. Please note that Ascentis typically does not ship any reports to clients. All of your reports are instantly available when you complete your payroll processing. The next feature we're going to look at is the InstaChecks tool. The purpose of the InstaCheck tool is to allow you to create a check on demand. You may be more familiar with the term manual checks, which is basically the idea of creating a check manually or on demand, which you can then calculate and print to give to the employee. In Ascentis, these on-demand checks are referred to as InstaChecks, and this is the tool you would use to create those checks. Please be sure to view the Ascentis Payroll InstaChecks training module for a full training on this feature. The next feature we're going to look at is the third-party tool. The purpose of the third-party tool is to allow clients to set up third-party payees to pay monies to after each payroll. For example, when you receive a garnishment notice or a child support order, the state or agency garnishing the employee would be considered a payee. This tool allows you to set up a payee with an ID number, a mailing address, or even possibly a routing and account number if the payment should be sent by electronic file transfer, electronic funds transfer, or EFT. When you receive these payee notices, you can create the garnishment or child support deduction in the employee's master file and then link it to the payee that you created on the third-party screen. Then, when the payroll is processed and the deduction is taken from the employee, there will be a resulting check or EFT file created and ready to be sent to the payee. Although my examples thus far have been about child support or garnishments, the third-party feature can really be used for any sort of third-party payment where the deduction takes place in payroll and you then want to issue a payment to a third party. Other examples of using this tool might include HSA payments, either for electronic funds transfer or paper check, or 401k contributions, or possibly charitable contributions such as United Way. Please be sure to view the Ascentis Payroll third-party training module for a full training on this feature. The next feature we're going to review is the Reports feature. Now, the Reports feature serves many purposes. It's a place both to view and print reports that have already been run, as well as a place to manually create standard system reports or design and run your own custom reports. The top section of the screen is known as the Report Queue. This is where you can access a report that has already been created. Once you select a report, you can then view, print, or download the report. The bottom half of the screen is where you can create a report on demand. You can either create and generate one of the many existing standard system reports, or you can create a custom report using the InstaWriter feature. Please be sure to view the Ascentis Payroll Reports training. The next feature we're going to look at is the Utilities feature. Now there's many tools accessed from the main Utilities screen. At the top of the screen, you'll find several tabs. When you click on a tab, you'll be able to see and access any related tools. For example, we have a quarter-end tab that provides clients access to a quarter-end wizard. This wizard walks you through a review of your quarterly reports in preparation for Ascentis filing your quarterly information. Another important tab is the year-end tab. This is the tab that all clients will come to in order to access the year-end wizard. Similar to the quarter-end wizard, the year-end wizard walks you through a review of the year-end reports and W-2s in preparation for Ascentis filing your annual return and preparing the W-2s. Located below these tabs is the Setup section. Within this section are several tools that are instrumental in the setup of your payroll system. The first tool we're going to look at is the control file. The control file is what makes each client's payroll system unique. This is where the setup of most of the programs that control your payroll system takes place. Let's go through some of these together. Notice on the left-hand side there are different categories, and then underneath certain categories would be the links to those specific control file screens. So the first one we see here is Ascentis Time. For clients that use Ascentis Time, Payroll and Time have what's called workflow integration, where changes made to an employee's master file in Payroll will flow to Ascentis Time and update the employee's profile in Time. And new hires that are maybe passed from HR to Payroll will also flow from Payroll to Time to create the new hire's profile in Time. So the first thing I want to show you is Payroll Policies. In Ascentis Time, under Configuration, is the feature to create your payroll policies. And the payroll policies are what govern or control how the timesheets are calculated, such as how does it determine when the employee should receive overtime pay or double time pay? Are there any rules associated with lunch punching or rounding, and information such as that? When you create a new policy in Time, you also need to log into Ascentis Payroll and come into your control file and access the Payroll Policies control file screen. You'll see your new payroll policy there, where you can now associate it with your calendar cycle. If you only have one frequency, or one payroll processing frequency, then it's very easy to select the calendar cycle. If you have multiple payroll frequencies, you may see a list when you click the drop-down menu here, and you'll need to make sure you choose the appropriate calendar cycle to associate that payroll policy with. When you're done making your change, go ahead and click Save. Another screen we could look at is shift differentials. If you ever create a new shift differential in the Time side, you may also need to log into Ascentis Payroll. Make sure that you also have that shift on the payroll side, and then link that shift differential from Time with the appropriate shift differential on the payroll side. Let's look at a couple options under the Company subject. The first one is General Company. This is where you'll be able to see your legal company name, address, and federal ID number. Let's look at distribution descriptions. Basically, any labor level categories that you have set up in your payroll system, such as company, locations, projects, divisions, departments, basic labor level categories. Whatever categories you have defined under the distribution levels, so this is where the defining of the categories takes place, such as I have a 2-digit location, a 3-digit division, a 3-digit department, and a 4-digit GL account number for my overall labor level structure. Under distribution descriptions, this is where I could come to create a new location or a new division or a new department. So depending on your labor level categories, will depend on what descriptions you see associated with those categories, but this is the same screen all clients would access in the payroll side of Ascentis to create a new labor level value. Remember that when you use Ascentis Time and you use Ascentis Payroll and you use Ascentis HR, a vast suite of our products, whenever you create a new labor level value in HR, it must also be created in Payroll, and it must also be created in Time. And then it must be mapped between HR and Payroll in the Payroll connector before you try to assign that new labor level value to a new employee. Let's now take a look at the general ledger. So this is a screen that most clients can come to use that basically controls the general ledger mapping. So you could come here and then select the transaction type, say a pay code, for example, and then assign that pay code to a specific account number. There's also a cross-reference table where you could build a reference where the GL number changes depending on the department or the location or some other labor level. The import policy screen, let's talk about this one briefly. This is where you can come to see what you've decided in terms of which fields just automatically pass from HR to payroll and get accepted into the payroll master file without review, and which fields you want to continue to manually review and apply into the payroll system. Let's now look at special basis codes. The common time that clients would come here is if they have some sort of a retirement plan. This is where you could come to control the list or define the list of pay codes that are eligible for 401k deferrals. Another good screen to look at is workers' compensation. If you're interested, you can come here and set up a list of all of your different work comp codes by state, assigning them a code, a description, and a rate, as well as controlling the pay codes that are included or excluded in work comp wage basis, as well as including, or I should say actually excluding, any deductions that reduce work comp wages. So all of the setup that you do on this screen relates back to the standard workers' compensation reports that are available from the report screen of Ascentis Payroll. Let's move on to the employee master topic. Let's look at the job title screen. So this is another screen where if you're a client that uses Ascentis HR and you use Ascentis Payroll and you would like to pass job titles from HR to payroll, whenever you create a new job title in HR, you must also come into the control file and create that new job title in payroll, and then go into the payroll connector program and link the new job title from HR to the new job title in payroll. All of that must take place before HR tries to assign that job title to an employee. Let's also briefly look at the shift table. A lot of clients that use Ascentis Time have shift differentials. Depending on how your shift differentials work, the shift table might be something that you'll be utilizing from time to time if you need to create new shift differentials. Let's move under the payroll calculation screen. This is where the setup of all new deductions and other pays take place, as well as the default rules for what frequency those deductions are taken, or what the default calculation method is, or if there's a global amount or limit that can be applied to the deduction code. Let's now move down under payroll processing and briefly look at the W-2 setup screen. So this is where you can control your W-2 template, basically defining what special IRS codes are appropriate for your company or are applicable to your company that you want to set up, and which payer deduction codes you want to have totaled and printed in that box with that associated IRS code. Common examples are in box 10 of the W-2, dependent care should appear. That's often code 461 in a client's directory. Clients with 401k need to be printing IRS code D in box 12 of the W-2, and that's where you would associate all of your 401k codes. If you have Roth, that's also supposed to print in box 12 with its own unique IRS code. If you have HSA, that's also supposed to print in box 12 with its own unique code of W, and this is where you would put both the employee and employer HSA codes. You've also got box 14, which is a reconciliation box. Pretty much for your use, you can come in and specify if there's any kind of additional code you'd like to have printed and what description you'd like to have printed next to that amount, in case you wanted to give your employees other totals that they can use to reconcile in their W-2. The final field of the control file we're going to look at, or the final screen we're going to look at, is under security. It's the standard screen here. Now, each client should have somebody in their company that is set up as a security administrator. The security administrator can come into the control file, go to the security section, click on the standard tool, and then come up and select the user and the directory that they want to open the security profile for. They can then proceed through each of the tabs, deciding which features the employee should have access to. Once they're done making the selections of what this person's permissions should be, then they can go ahead and save the security profile for that person. We're going to go ahead now and close out of the control file and move on to the next important tool under the setup section, which is the calendar. This is another instrumental feature in the setup of your payroll directory. The calendar tool allows you to schedule your regular, reoccurring payroll events, as well as any off-cycle payrolls that you'd like to set up or arrange. If your payroll is using calendar integration, then the events that you create for the year will also be visible on that main employee screen under upcoming and past due events. The next feature under setup that we'll look at is the screen designer. This feature allows you to design and create your own unique custom master file screens. These screens can then be accessed and populated within the payroll master files. The next feature is templates. This feature allows you to create your own quick entry payroll templates, as well as designing, editing, or modifying employee presets or employee filters. The final tool we'll look at under setup is personal preferences. Now, this feature allows you to set up your own login preferences. These preferences are unique to your login, and therefore each person with a username and password to payroll can log in and set up their own preferences. Let's go ahead and look through these so you have an idea of how to set up your preferences the first time you log into payroll. There's basically 3 tabs you can go through. The first one is General. From the General tab, you have an option to set up when you have to create a master file or a new hires master file in the payroll system. Would you want to primarily be presented with the option to complete the full master file, or just go through the quick setup? Now, my one comment for you on this would be that clients that use Ascentis HR, most of the time your new hires would come directly from HR and would flow through the connector tool, which is located at the bottom of the screen here. We're going to talk about this in just a little bit. Clients that don't have Ascentis HR, those clients would need to manually create all new hires directly in payroll. So in that case, this setting here or this preference would be applicable to those clients. Default printing format. This is an applicable option for all clients. The recommendation is that you set yourself to plain text. What this has to do with is every time you go to print a report, it pops up and gives you the option to choose between formatted reporting or plain text. The difference is that the formatted option basically shades the paper, it puts everything in a nice box, but it's also going to eat up all your toner in a pretty short order. Plain text is a good default option because that's just going to print plain, if you will. It's not really going to look pretty per se. You wouldn't want to frame it, but it's the most common option because most of the time when we're printing something, it's simply so we can review it, mark it up, and then later shred it. So plain text is the recommended option as your default. You can always select the formatted option individually when you're printing a report. Use server time zone, which is the Pacific Standard Time. For any clients that are already on Pacific time, this feature is not applicable to you. If you're a client on the East Coast, perhaps, or some other time zone, and you would like to see the date and timestamp in the system reflect the server time zone, which is Pacific time, you could go ahead and mark this option. The next tab is Appearances, and this is where you can select your theme. The Ascentis theme is what we're looking at right now, where you kind of see a nice, clean, crisp, white background. The native theme is an older version where you would see kind of a grayish background to the system. Row selection color, this is important. It's a good idea to come in here and set up a preference color. This would, the recommendation would be to choose something that is bold or vibrant. And the reason is that this color that you have selected here, this is the color that the system is going to use to highlight things in when it's trying to get your attention about something that it thinks is important in the payroll system. So select a bold, vibrant color. Make sure you don't choose anything in the first two rows, as those are very muted. The final tab here is Paths, and this is actually my favorite part of personal preferences. This is where you can come to set up a default so that every time you download a report, it always takes you to a specific location in the system. So perhaps you want to create a specific place under My Documents that you can go and that the system will always take you to that place. The same thing with uploading. If you're going to be a client that's going to be importing files on a regular basis, perhaps you want to have the system always instantly take you to a specific location or folder within your system. Once you've finished making your changes, go ahead and click Save, and those preferences will now be in play. The final tool or feature that I want to highlight to you is Custom Reports and Procedures. Now, not all clients will have this section when they come to the utility screen. It's only if Ascentis has designed any custom reports for your company that you may have this section here where you would need to come and select that custom report or program and be able to run it from the Utilities menu. Now, some of the features located on this screen have individual recorded trainings that you can view. Please be sure to look for those. Let's now move on to the tools located at the bottom of the window. The first tool is Quick Links. Now, Quick Links allows you to access several payroll features without having to go to the screen that those features technically reside on. For example, you could be on the main employee screen, but then use the Quick Links option to get into the control file, even though the control file is technically located under the Utilities tab. Now, some of the features located in Quick Links are tools that we've already looked at, but let's spend a few minutes looking at the few that we haven't. The first one is Ascentis News. Clicking on this link allows you to view, get back in and view the message of the day, which is what we kind of talked about at the beginning of the training here, where you can see any messages or pieces of information that we're trying to impart to you. Also from the Ascentis News is the ability to click on a link to find Ascentis customer support representative contact information. And then there's also a link to get into the Ascentis website. The next feature under Ascentis News that we haven't seen yet is the Downloads tool. Basically, this is a link that would display a list of any reports that you've attempted to download recently. You can always clear this list from time to time. Also available under Quick Links is the Refresh Directory tool. Now, this is a very important tool. Whenever something is changed in your system while you're currently logged in, such as maybe you're logged in and then you request to have Ascentis create a new pay or deduction code for you, or to create a new report for you. we may ask you to refresh your directory, and this is where you could go to do that. Another good tool is System Info. Now this tool just basically provides some quick and useful information regarding the server that you're currently connected to, as well as the version of Ascentis Payroll that you're using, and then also including environment information such as your operating system and your Java version. The next tool located at the bottom is the Change Directory tool. So if you're a client that has multiple payroll directories, you can use this tool to quickly move in and out of your various payroll directories. There's also a link here, another opportunity to refresh your directory, located under the Change Directory button. The next feature is the Pending Changes connector. So if you're a client that uses Ascentis HR, Ascentis Time, or self-service, or all of the above, you may have access to a tool that allows you to see pending changes that have come from another Ascentis product and are now awaiting review in the payroll application, or into the payroll system. Now, we actually have a payroll connector training module that you can attend if you'd like to get a full training on how to use this feature. The next tool down at the bottom is the status bar. The purpose of this bar is to just basically show you where you are in the process of completing your payroll. This bar will fill up as you go through steps 1 through 5 of payroll processing. The next tool is the Help feature. When you click on the Help feature, it'll take you into our online training manual. Notice over on the left-hand side there's a variety of topics. You can go here and click on a link and then read about whatever subject you have a question about. The last feature located at the bottom is the date and time stamp. Now, by default, the date and time stamp is showing you your time zone information. You can, however, change to use the server time zone, which is Pacific time. We discussed briefly a few minutes ago how you would do that under the Preferences. On the General tab, you can mark the box to use server time zone. Now this completes the Ascentis Payroll Product Overview training. Thank you for attending. We hope you have an opportunity to also attend our various other Ascentis Payroll training modules.